we are joined by Mathis Wackernagel. I will put him on the spotlight just now. Mathis, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Welcome, Mathis. We have been talking about you since yesterday and how generous you have been with your consent to join the program, and you're going to educate us about the Global Footprint Network and so many other things also. So 9 o'clock slot, we are going to hit in about 6 minutes. So we'll be starting with some customary videos, the theme songs, and some messages we had from President Taja Hallonen, the Foreign Minister, the President, the Resort. We'll play out your both videos, and by that time, I think it will be 9:30 Indian Standard Time when you will have the platform to educate us for half an hour. And I hope that you will have some audience who will interact with you. But please understand that this is it's like a family platform. There are people and students, all sorts of people from all around the world. It's like a family gathering. And I know there have been some great guns who joined the program, from David Jensen to Mark Pelahi to, and I was asked every time by every dignitary, what is the program? What I have to do? Because there's no structure to it. And I said simply, we are just normal people. We don't hold degrees in environment. And you know, Mathis, what happens that we become such a slave to structures that the moment it gets disturbed, we do not know what to do. And that is what exactly Corona has also done. It has disturbed the structure, the planning that we always have got used to. And we really don't know what to do. And yesterday I was saying we have every single thing on this planet. We have the resources, we have the brain, we have good people, we have will and desire, but somehow these things are not coming together. That is why it is so difficult to enact changes. It is not that we cannot do that, but we are not able to come together, and that is why it doesn't happen. Anyway, so in 4 minutes time, we hit the 9 to 12 o'clock slot. That's the last 8 slot for this event. It has been going on for last 21 hours, Mathis, non-stop. And since yesterday, we have had some great guests. We had Mark Pelahi, Director of European Foreign Institute, who was live with us. And we had Vishwajit Saha, Director of Central Board of Secondary Education, Government of India. Government of India, CBSE, has 20,000 schools in across 25 countries. So they are very important for us because we can really reach out to the network of all these students, millions of them. And we were supposed to be joined by David Jensen, United Nations Environment Program, Head of Environmental Sustainability and Peace, and also digital transformation. He has been very supportive. Unfortunately, he had a death in his extended family, so he couldn't be live. But maybe he could be with us maybe today itself or maybe sometime later on. He did send a nice video that will show after we have finished. So I'll request Mathis, he can stay up a little late tonight after you finish with us. And because we have some really great content which you will enjoy, performances and some communication that we have had. Anyway, Mathis, I would like to show now your video that it's, wait a second.
It may be easier just, I don't know if the videos are that helpful, but maybe just chat a little.
I have seen that. I've edited it also without your permission. A little bit, only a little bit. So I'll show, first of all, it's very technical but very knowledgeable video. It's a national footprint account for or ecological balance sheet for 180 plus countries. This is very useful video and we will have some clues. So JK, can you please see 11?
Nearly every nation has committed to reducing its carbon footprint. But this is no simple undertaking. For example, let's say part of your country's plan is to restore forest land to sequester carbon. This should lead to a reduction in net carbon emissions. However, this may also reduce cropland, and therefore your country's ability to produce its own food. Global Footprint Network measures more than just a country's carbon footprint. Our national footprint accounts can provide a comprehensive way to better understand the links between competing demands on our planet. Our accounts help national governments understand and manage their natural resources to help them make confident policy decisions and create a prosperous, resilient future for their residents. They provide an ecological balance sheet for each country. The footprint accounts measure a country's annual demand for the goods and services that its land and seas can provide. We then compare that to the resources available, which we call biocapacity. This information can be used to identify which countries are using more ecological resources and services than they have, who we call ecological debtors, and those with more resources than they're using. We call them ecological creditors. Government leaders from the United Arab Emirates, the Philippines, and Montenegro are using our data to develop and evaluate sustainability policy. And thousands of scientists and students from around the world have downloaded our data to research everything from socioeconomic indicators to land use patterns. Our footprint accounts are based on nearly 200,000 data points per country per year. Data has been compiled since 1961, allowing users to track trends over time. Most nations have seen their ecological footprints go up, so that today, the human population worldwide is using 1.6 times more natural resources and services than our planet can regenerate in a year. Carbon is the largest contributor to our ecological footprint globally. We believe that you can't manage what you can't measure. It's time to get our ecological balance sheets back in check. Download our free public data package to learn more about the national footprint accounts today.
Thank you, Mathis, for this video. I already messaged some of the girls who were up in the show last night. And they just asked, is that the Blue Planet Prize award? I said, yes, it's live from California. So they are waiting. Actually, most of the students are having examinations all over the country, as in other countries also. And it's all going online. So, but they will be joining as soon as possible. So it will be going to be a monologue, but they'll be listening and they'll be following you. And as soon as they join in, they might be asking some questions. I have another video which I tried to edit, but I couldn't find anything to edit out. This is your TEDx 16-minute video. So, and I also thought if he couldn't be online, then I might as well show it the entire thing. It's a 16-minute long video, but I want to show it. Is that okay with you?
Maybe afterwards or something, because maybe it's a little bit too tedious, or so people can see it when they have time.
Okay, so let us get on with you. Let us get on with you then, and
let's
maybe
just chat.
We can.
With all these wonderful people online. Yeah.
Okay.
And I like that you said not everything goes exactly after plan, so we can have conversations and chat with each other, and that's wonderful. And I congratulate you for bringing so many people together over all these time zones. And you learn directly that the world is a round place because not everybody's up at the same time. So it's a direct experience of being on this one lovely planet. And thank you for this all these wonderful messages. I don't know what's best to tell you, but perhaps I'll tell you a little bit about my life, because as you can see now, I have white hair coming out of my face. That means I'm a little bit older than the young people that I live with. But essentially, I mean, what is becoming clear is that even if you want to maintain climate change to less than 2 degrees, let alone 1.5 degrees, there's no other way, scientifically, there's no other way that we have to be out of using fossil fuels way before 2050. So everybody born after 1985, and that's probably everybody here online minus me, they will be still in the workforce by 2050. That means they, or you rather, you will oversee in your lifetime a total transformation of the economy from one that is incredibly dependent on fossil fuels to one that is not anymore dependent on fossil fuels. That's a transformation faster than, for example, the cell phones. You know, we think, oh my God, the cell phones are moving so fast, but that's just the cell phones. The entire economy will have to transform faster, and that's your project. Sorry for giving it to you. It's on the one side, it's on the one hand, it's very exciting because you have to rethink everything, and on the other hand, it's quite daunting too. It's a big transformation that you have to take on, and so that's kind of what this means. But I think what I would like to talk about is just how climate change. It's actually there's a bigger context to it. When I was born in 1962. That's now 58 years ago. And when I was born, I was not so much after World War II. I grew up in Switzerland, and Switzerland was very lucky that it was not caught by the war. It was surrounded by war, but it didn't have war in Switzerland. But because it was surrounded and was already very densely populated, Switzerland only had 7 months of food per year. 7 months. but they're 12 months in a year. So what do you do with the rest? So they made kind of little victory gardens, so everybody would plant a little bit of food that gave them another month. They ate a little bit less, that would give them another month, but then they still had to get extra food from somewhere else. It was very tight and very tough. And my parents told me a lot about it. So that was influencing my thinking a lot. And I wondered, like, food is so important. Why are we not more careful with it? And as a child, many times we went for vacation to a farm that could help the cows being milked and to spread the manure and harvest the apples. And it was a wonderful time. And I was so surprised because I lived in the city during the year. Like the city would get all this wonderful food from the countryside, and they would pay so little to the farmers. The farmers would be the poor people, and the rich people would sit in the city and say, how is that possible? The farmers give us all the food, and then they don't even get money for it. And then I wondered, in Switzerland, how come Switzerland has such a high income and we don't even have resources? That's a very, very strange world. I could not figure it out. And I still can't, to be totally honest. It's a very strange world. But then when I was just 10 years old, for the first time, the world experienced what was called the oil crisis, an oil shock, that suddenly it wasn't clear whether we would get enough oil and gas to run our cars and everything. And that was a shock, not just physically, but mentally to people. Say, wow, what's going on? That's very strange. And for us children, it wasn't really that much of a shock. It was a big joy because the Swiss government had the foresight to say, okay, let's have 3 carb-free Sundays, which of course doesn't solve the problem. But mentally, it was amazing because we could go and ride our bicycles in the middle of the highway. And it was great. And we had a great laugh, and it was just a wonderful day. And my parents and the neighbors talked with each other, which didn't happen that often. So it was really memorable. So for me, thinking, oh, wow, one day we will not be able to live with fossil fuels. It will be a totally different life, but it will be a great life because you can bicycle on the highway. I thought that was going to be great. And that was kind of also, I had always a very positive idea about, wow, a fossil fuel-free future. That's actually a good thing. That would be wonderful. Now, that happened when I was 11 years old. And since then, I thought, when I was 11, I thought, oh, within 5 years, maybe 10, that will happen. And now I'm 58 years old. It still hasn't happened. The percentage of fossil fuel used for all the commercial energy we consume is still about the same as in 1973. It's quite shocking how little we have moved with all the science and insight. And also in 1972, there was the first global conference that talked about environment and development. It was actually called UN Conference about Environment and Development in Stockholm. And the theme of the conference was one planet only, or only one Earth, or something like that. So wow, they were so clear back then. And now we have all these complicated concepts and nobody wants to dare to say what it means. But in the end, that's the big question. How can we live off our planet? Because the future is extremely predictable. We always think, oh, you cannot know the future. Let me tell you about the future. It's very predictable. There will be people, and people will want to sleep. They will want to eat. They will want to drink clean water. They will want to be safe. They want to move around. And also, no matter what, they will live in a world with more climate change and more resource security. Now, knowing that helps you to navigate better. If you live in a city, for example, the question is not so much, oh my God, like how can I save the world? But actually say, oh, I know which future my city will live in. I know it. So are we preparing our city for this future? Will we be able to operate in the future? What kind of things should we build and what kinds of things should we no longer build? It's quite straightforward in some ways. So we can take the future in our hands because actually you are the captains of Spaceship Earth. We are in a spaceship. It's called Spaceship Earth. And we know actually that we have a life support system that provides oxygen and food and water and everything. And we know that we overuse it. We do these basic calculations, just comparing how much do we draw from nature compared to how much nature can renew. And we come to the conclusion that even conservative estimates conservative meaning we probably underestimate human demand, and probably we exaggerate how much Earth can produce. Demand now exceeds regeneration by at least 50 to 60%. So that's like you're in a spaceship and you use more oxygen that being regenerated and more food, and you say, oh, that's not such a good idea, you know. So that's kind of that's where we're in, and you're the captains. You're the captains of that boat, and say, what do you want? So people often ask me, say, okay, what should we do? As if one thing could change things, you know. You have been up for 24 hours now, and that's one part of what we need to do. There's so many things we should do, but they say, what should we do? And our core answer is kind of always the same. It's a little bit to kind of provoke people, but it's to say, sleep enough. Huh? Why sleep enough? Because if you sleep enough, your brain is healthy. You can make clear thoughts. You can make good decisions, and you can make good decisions what it actually takes to operate well in the future. And if everybody did that, collectively, we would be in a much, much better place. Because like with COVID, what is the trick with COVID? COVID, the biggest trick is if you protect yourself, you protect everybody else. The same is true with climate change and resource constraints. If you protect your cities, you'll be able to operate well. Most likely also all you do also helps the rest of the world to operate much better, because your city will be less resource demanding. Your city will be more stable. Your city will be able to operate. So you're making things easier. So that's the beautiful thing about the sustainability transformation. It's not like, even though so many people are excited, how many people are excited about the soccer world championship or the Olympics or something like that. In these sport events, only one team wins and everybody else loses. How sad. And with sustainability, it's the exact opposite. The more win, the more win. That's kind of it's a winning game. And I think that's kind of how we tell ourselves a story, to recognize, wow, what does it take to be successful in the future? How do we need to look at the world? Too often we are told to say, oh, we need global collaboration. Once everybody agrees, then we can act. You know, we have these global climate conventions trying to get people together. And it's wonderful that we talk with each other. But for everybody who thinks that we should only act once we all agree, that's a totally wrong business model. Why would you wait for anybody else? It's like there's a big storm coming, you sit in a boat. Why would you say, I'm not fixing and preparing my boat until everybody else is preparing their boat? That's absurd, but essentially that's what we're doing. So the one planet aspect, one planet is not a goal. It's our context. We live on this one planet. We know it's being overused. So even more so, thinking about our city, our community, our household, our country, our company, our friends. It's all about how do we prepare ourselves? And for that, we need a good compass. Like when we go on a little trip, understand which direction to go. Essentially, we say it's again an analogy, but it's actually quite a close analogy. Countries now are like planes. They fly. They have pilots. But what they don't have is a fuel gauge. They don't realize how much they consume compared to how much is left in the gas tank, whether it's time to land. And planes would be quite unsafe. They wouldn't be allowed to fly, actually, if they didn't have a fuel gauge. That would be prohibited. But we are allowed to operate countries without a fuel gauge. It's actually quite negligent, I think. It's more than negligent, it's dangerous. And so that's why I believe even having this fuel gauge doesn't tell us everything. It just gives us one more insight in how we need to operate. And I think that's kind of the silly thing, you know, people, when they hear environment, they think it's something nice and noble is wonderful because noble sounds so wonderful. And of course it is. But even more important, it's a necessary thing. Having a healthy environment, having the resource security to operate is as essential as not going financially bankrupt. If you go financially bankrupt, of course, you know it's terrible. And so people say, oh, that's very serious. But actually, environment is at least as serious. But we do if it's just kind of this nice add-on, the seventh wheel on the car. You know, that's not so important. But in reality, it's actually the primary thing. There's no nature in us. We are nature. We are part of nature. We are a subsystem of nature. We can never be healthier than the whole system because we are part of it. We are part of it. So understanding how healthy our system is, how much we depend on it, how can we not want to know that? And that's so interesting that we think, wow, that cannot be that important, some people say. There are people planning. I mean, if you go to many universities still, they teach a colonial model of economics. They say resources don't exist. They don't say that like that. They just don't exist. They never talk about them. And just to do as we can kind of take more and more and more and more and more. And as it would work because we can always get from somewhere else. So modern colonialism is not anything more than one country exploits the other. Still a little bit like that. It's cities exploiting the countryside. Everybody who thinks we can always get it from somewhere else. That's a colonial thought in the end, because in a world that is overused, can we always get from somewhere else, or do we get at the expense of somebody else? And if you get at the expense of somewhere else, it's not just morally questionable, we may put ourselves at risk. So it is becoming essential. So that's why I think I'm glad you have the theme of green peace, because conflict comes from kind of confrontation about like conflict over resources often, and not being resource secure fuels this uncertainty, fuels these conflicts. So resource security, I think, is a foundational piece that we underestimate. I don't know if we should stop here. I mean, there's so much more to share or graphs, and we
Yes,
could go and
Mathis,
visit actually
I
some.
have some questions which has always been wandering in my mind. And this is exactly you touched upon. So if anybody does or not, I'll do so. And I'll share some of my experience also. You know, the problem is like that, and everybody thinks Corona is a problem. I think it has given us a lot of eyesight. It's given us sight into what things can be if you do not stop yourself. For instance, the modern generation, the youth and the kids who are watching us throughout the world today, unfortunately, they do not know the beginning of resources and the end of it. They are only the middle users. They do not know where these resources originate, how much, and how they end. Is it true? And I think a couple of generations back, people were more conservative, not because they had a lot of knowledge, but because they were using resources directly from their own hands. So they knew this much of water is available. If I drain the well too much, it's going to run empty and we are going to suffer. So they were careful about it. Today's generation do not know where things come from and where they go. So they just use it. So it's not that they don't want to do it, but they do not know. Second thing, as you said, with everything artificially created, every system, and we have seen that happening in Corona. Every structure gets broken if it is created. Someday, some point of time, the supply chains will break, the production will break, the resources will break down, and we really do not know how we are going to tackle about it. So, you know, so far we enjoyed zombie movies. You must have seen some of them like Walking Dead or so on, apocalyptic movies, and we were just enjoyed it. Now, when we watch it, I saw some of them in the Corona period at home in isolation, and I imagine this is going to happen. It's not just a movie; it is very practical. Seeing the situation. For instance, if Corona stayed on for a longer time, and you see how it broke supply chains and broke the connection between countries and resources, there is going to be a civil war on the roads because people simply cannot live without what they have been used to. And I'll share something very nice with you. I was working in Assam Valley where I joined the program in 2020 years back. It's a very nice part of northeastern part of India. It's a very remote location, naturally very beautiful, very rich. And we always took our school students into mountain hikes. You know, India has great mountains. So they would trek for 7 or 6 days. They'll be into the mountains, right from ages 8, 9, 10, 11 up to 14, 16. So initially, because this was a boarding school, so a lot of kids came from privileged families, and they were not used to running without the useful modern amenities. So first day or second day, they'll be cribbing hell of a lot at the point of being abusive with each other. Where have you brought us? There's no food, there's no shops, there's no mobile towers, there's no connection, no nothing. But surprisingly, third day onwards, when they settled into things, no mobile communication, no food shops, no nothing except the forest, and maybe they will have to go next to the river to get their toilet thing done. But they started enjoying that. They settled into the scheme of things. And after 6 or 7 days, when we will return, they will regret going back to the modern life. Such was a transformation in 3 days. And after they passed out from the school, if you ask them what was your best experience inside the school, they will always mention that trekking thing or into the mountains. So today we blame this modern generation that they use resources, but maybe it is fault in our education system. It is fault in our way of dealing with things. They do not know where the resources originate, where they end. They are just users, and people like you are there. They are highlighting those things, just like you said, a plane flying without a fuel gauge. There's another concept that has been broken terribly. Every single citizen of the world, doesn't matter whether it's America or India or a remote part of the world, we thought they are not so developed. We always believe they are governments, they are strong people, they are strong structures that will protect us, that will help us. We have seen it does not. None of the governments have been able to help, not because they couldn't, just because they were not prepared, because they did not expect. So literally at most point of time, people are left to their own devices. So just like you said, if you're setting a boat and you're waiting that somebody else will fix the boat, or you will do it only when others have fixed it up, you are in great trouble. But the point is that how do we get this thought? It's a very simple concept. It's a very simple thought. But how do we get this thought across to the mind of, as somebody on the show said, this young generation is not the future, it is the present. Future is, as you say, is very predictable. If we keep on doing what we are doing, we know what is going to happen to us. Whether we shut our eyes or whether we are open to it, it's going to happen without asking. So Mathis, how do you think we can help, our network help, or we can get these thoughts into the minds of young people so they realize the start of resources and the end of resources? Another thing that we were part of WCEF in Finland last year, that is World Circular Economic Conference. And Pawnee, 14-year-old, is the co-host today. She was there, spoke at the length also. She was the only youth. It's very interesting that the corporations, some companies have now come on to discuss about circular things. It's like the companies or production houses are responsible for not only producing, but also looking at the end use of it, how to bring it back into regeneration. And Pawnee made a very strong statement because he was very worried. These are all experts from big like Oxford University, from Harvard, and what she's going to say. But she made a very nice statement when she was posed a question. She said, why you are asking a 12-year-old girl? I'm in Finland at an extent. I should be enjoying the nature, the greenery, and playing around rather than facing these difficult questions myself. You guys have spoiled it for us. You got to find a solution and give it to us. We'll do that. That was pretty interesting. So back to the question, what do you think we can do, or how we can get these ideas to these young guys who actually things start happening on the ground level, which, as you said, is not moving at all. In 25 years, 30 years, nothing has moved. It's all stuck where it was. Nothing practically has changed.
To me, the essence, I think, is what we call skin in the game. And what I observe, it's the younger people who start to recognize about their lives. So maybe it's not so much what we can help them to see. It's more kind of helping ourselves to listen to them and say, so what do you need to be successful? How can I help you? Because you will be the captain of Spaceship Earth. What do you need? So because I see that in the younger generation also, what is going to have around the world with the Fridays for Future movement. The young people, they don't just think it's the theory far, far away. They say, wow, this could affect my life. My life could get shorter because we're not reacting. So they don't need to be educated around it. They already have everything. Clearly we have to resolve that, and we can be their support. We can be their mentors. We can be their helpers. So, because I think more important even than understanding everything is to have an alignment of incentives. If young people say, it's about me, they will move mountains. And I see that also, like often the younger people get interviewed by silly old journalists who think in the old way, and moralize or say, what can you do? I mean, are you even a vegetarian? Should you even talk about it? And they don't. And the young people who have this clarity, they don't get thrown off and get into kind of this moral battle. They just say, oh yeah, that's good question. But what really matters is, how will society be able to reorganize? Because otherwise we all won't be able to live well. So they see it with such clarity. I think that's what we need to encourage and invite and be there for them. I know, like I spoke with a young woman who's at a big council in Germany, where she, like, this big German council, the future of something or another, like, is it the future of energy or whatever it is, and so she is kind of the youth token. So everybody on the team is asked when they have their vacations, or they would have the meeting at the right time. They don't ask the young people, because they're just the young token people. Yeah. I talked with her and said, actually, it's the other way around. Who is the most important person on this committee? I said, it's you, because all the others will be dead. They have to serve you. When they propose silly things, you ask them, how is that going to serve me and my friends to be able to operate? Like, how can they, like, explain that to me? So they are the servants to her, not the other way around. She's a token young people. So we listen to the young people, and we continue to do all the things that we've always done. So I think that's what I would call skin in the game. The young people who recognize it's about us. We got to get there. It's not a question about hope or despair. There's no choice. That's the only path forward. We sometimes call it one planet prosperity, because it's we want to have great prosperous life, and this one planet is not going to go away. So the only choice is between one planet prosperity and one planet misery. Choose. Not so difficult. So when a young person has that clarity and say, that's what we need, nothing can stop them. And I think our purpose really is helping them not to get stopped.
Yes, Mathis, again, as I said, there's one point I said, what cannot be measured, you can do nothing about it. So like one topic we had in this, because we have a lot of educators also in this, and also people who make the national education policies. Recently, India also national education, education policy was launched. But I have been a little critical, because we know that we are teaching good science, good maths, good environmental science, good geography, good history. We're not teaching life skills in the real sense. So he named it national curriculums, and all across the world. I've even asked about the Finnish education system, although I'm very appreciative of that. These curriculums are preaching, they're not really teaching. See, a young guy, they use mobiles all the time. So as they say, what cannot be measured, we need to have measures in mind. They are constantly looking at their phone batteries. They know that when the battery runs out, they're out of communication. So they're very mindful of that the battery, the mobile does not run out of battery. However, when it comes to natural resources, they do not do it, because they do not know how to measure it, or maybe they have not been taught about it. So I was thinking there has to be some sort of mechanism that has to be built or ingrained into our maybe education system, something that every individual is aware of their own area of work. As you said, it's your own boat. You got to save yourself, then only you can save the planet.
We live in these funny stories that are still taught at universities, that tell us, oh, we don't require resources because we have technology. But with all the technology we've had in the past, we always use more and more resources. It hasn't really decoupled us from the resource use. So I think it's absolutely true. It's very interesting comparison that you make, that we keep our phones charged because we see it go hungry, and then we charge it because we see the metric of the battery. It's very, and we don't think it's relevant to know whether our country is resource secure. When you say the we, it's a bit of it's not a very clear we, but I would say I know of very, very few countries that have a resource strategy attached to their economic development idea. Very, very, very few. I mean, it even goes that perverse, like in Latin America, there's this famous development theory that they look at the Swiss and say, oh, the Swiss, they cut all their forests and everything, and then they got rich. So let's cut our forests and then we'll be rich. So, I mean, which is totally absurd, of course. But so it's called el derecho al desarrollo. It means the right to develop. And when we showed them kind of curves, how they are abusing their ecological capacity, even though they have a lot in South America, but they're losing it fast because of, like, demand is going up, there's more people using more, and so there's less per person, etc. And we said, this is not el derecho al desarrollo. This is not the right to develop. This is the right to collapse. El derecho al colapso. You know, they say, oh yeah, maybe that's not a good idea. So it's quite stunning how deeply ingrained in economic thinking it still is. And we haven't become real about the physical reality. And the consequence is the prices are very low of resources. So we think, oh, it's so abundant. But in the end, then you see things like that, like Chennai had this experience, or Cape Town had this experience. People didn't pay much for water overall. I mean, I'm sure they paid a lot, but not that much compared to the value of the city. And if you don't have water, Cape Town or Chennai loses enormously in value. You know, without water, it's the infrastructure is not worth much. So that's the question. The question is not what's the value of nature. What's the value of the economy without nature? I can tell you exactly. It's worth zero. You know, that's I think not yet fully recognized. But I think the younger people recognize that. We need to give them the courage to speak to that truth, which seems so obvious. Because in the end, we are gambling with their lives, and then once they recognize that, I think they become unstoppable, as we have seen in many places around the world.
Okay, Mathis, that water thing reminds me of another very practical experience. Do you think it is because our direct interaction with nature has stopped or is cut very short? Because once you interact with the nature, it tells you how to conserve your resources. Another story that, like when we took the students onto the trek in mountains, so when they were back in school or in the cities, they did not. They will have a Bisleri water bottle and they will drink it and throw it away out from the tap. Into the mountains, you know, in order to survive in the mountains, whether you had food or not, you must always have water bottle with you. So first day onwards, they will run out of water. Then they learned they will have their water. They will not sip it until they found another resource to fill it again. And no matter how good the friend was, if he asks for water, you will give everything else, your money, your mobile, your camera, your food, not the water. They will not share it at all. So within a day or two, they learned how to conserve resources because they realized that without water, they are going to be doomed completely. So I think that that's also in the modern education system, in the modern societies, that direct nature interaction with nature has stopped, has been cut short. So we are not practically taught, we do not know practically know what problems we are running into. So that is what I was wondering, whether we, because we work with students, basically how they know that, but how to make them or change our education policy so it becomes a part and parcel of their life. So they know at hand that if the battery runs out, you're out of communication. If the resources run out, you're out of life. The planet doesn't need to be saved. The planet will survive. We need to save ourselves.
We've made it extremely simple. I think something I'm proud of, because it's actually, I didn't invent it. It's the Earth Overshoot Day that we do every year. It's an idea of a friend of mine from Great Britain, actually, in the end. But so essentially, we can explain the idea of planet's overuse with words every primary school students can understand. Like, yes. I will tell you a sentence, only one word will have 3 syllables, but I'm sure even a primary school student understands, because the word that has 3 syllables is January. Most kids understand January. So it goes from January 1st to August 22nd. People around the world have used as much as our planet can renew. You know, so I didn't say any 3-syllable word, only 2-syllable words. And what I've explained with it is not only the concept of using more than what there is, but I give them even a number, because kids say, oh, August 22nd, that's still a long time till the end of the year, you know, so until we have our New Year's party, that's a long time. There's something not right. And so that's kind of the, and we're not blaming fingers or saying, just say, this is a description that, oh, something is funny, you know, so that's good. And then the other thing is to say, so what can we do? And for that, we use the hand, because it's easy, like what are the possibilities? We call it move the date. How can we move the date? So the thumb represents the regeneration. We need a healthier planet. We need agriculture that's more regenerative, and we need to plant trees, as Enno does, and all these kind of things to make the world a stronger place. On demand side, there are 4 things that we can do that are also mathematically like covering it. How do we operate our cities and manage our cities and build our cities? Because the way we live, like cities define largely how we live, like how we move, whether they're energy efficient, the house, etc. How do we power them? That's the energy system. That's that one. How do we feed ourselves? Now food uses about half the planet's capacity, and then how many we are. If you double as many, that is only half as much planet. So by looking at this, shows you the whole options for action. In each one of them, there are opportunities to make lives better, while at the same time making our lives more secure. So it's in the end, it's quite simple. As I said, like Earth Overshoot Day, wow, by August 22nd, we've used everything. And then if you want to move the date, that's actually good for us. We will move out of overshoot whether we like it or not. The question is whether we choose, we do it by design or we do it by disaster.
Yes,
That's
yes.
choose your future. And here are the options. It's written in your hand, and your hands will make the future for the better of the worse.
Yes,
And
yes.
so that's how simple it is in the end.
Yeah, I did see that Earth Overshoot videos, and I'm sure that our audience is going to see that also. I think we have some young audience who I'd ask them whether they have some questions for you. Can I
Good.
spot you? Shivangi, are you
And
here?
Yes, sir, I'm right here.
Yeah,
Oh,
Shivangi was
wonderful.
like, God, oh, the blue plant man, the awardee one. Shivangi is Mathis. Just let me bring Mathis into. Okay.
I can hear her very well, see her very well. Wonderful. I look forward to your question.
Yes.
I'm very excited.
Shivangi is a very talented girl. She is Miss Teen Diva finalist. So she is participating in this beauty pageant. She's all of how old are you, Shivangi?
So I'm 18. I just graduated high school.
She is just 18,
Wow.
and her father was in Navy, if I remember.
Yes, sir.
Yes, her
Perfect.
father was in Navy. And Shivangi, please ask a question to Mathis. He is an interactive guy. He's waiting with the questions, and especially the younger.
The tough part is the question.
Thank you
Answering is
so much.
easy.
Thank you so much for being here, sir. And my question is that right now in the political arena, we have so much shift of power between the countries, and we're actually living in an era where most parts of the world are actually areas of conflict. And these areas of conflict actually lead to land desertification, which actually is contributing to climate change, which is the main thing that's killing our earth. So now it's not possible for us to just stop the war. But what can we do to just make the situation slightly better?
Hmm. The audio wasn't totally good, so I may not
Yeah,
have totally understood, but I think what you asked is kind of like also in the context of climate, what can we do to make the situation better? Yeah. And I think the question only is it slightly better. It's not about whether we slightly win or slightly not win. I think we have to get there, so it's not just slightly. What can we do? I mean, as I said before, one thing is sleep enough so you have a good brain and make good decisions. I think it might be a little bit silly, but it's actually true. The second thing, I think the most important thing is, if you're willing to do that, give up saying should. Why is that? If you say, it should be like this, it should be like that, we indicate that it will never happen. Just we point fingers, it should be like different. If you say, that's what I want to live in a city without cars, then that's kind of you. So who are you? What do you want? So I want to hear from your generation, like, what do you want for the future? I want to live in a world where everybody has equal rights. I want to live in a world that is powered by the sun. I want to live so what do you want? That's a question to you.
One more thing I wanted to point out was that, so the main subjects I graduated with was biology and environmental studies. And for one of the projects, I actually did a survey knowing that the youth in my state, which is Pune, which is a city in India, what's stopping them from actually, taking initiatives to help us live in a more sustainable manner. And I actually realized that a lot of people are very much aware about the problems and everything, the solutions. In fact, they know more than I do. And I realized there's something known as eco-anxiety. Everyone is aware of the problems. Everyone knows that we are actually killing our planet, and it's not long when nature actually unleashes a fury on us. But they feel helpless. They think about it, they get scared. So their only solution is to try and ignore what exactly is going on. Am I audible to everyone?
Shivangi, we have a bit of problem with your audio, but we can make out what you're trying to say. So
Yes.
Mathis will answer anyway.
So I think you talked about, I think what I heard is how people get anxious and kind of to think, what can I do? And I'm so small and it's so difficult, and you actually know better. Why don't we do it? One thing, I think the power of what's the most powerful tool of young people? You know what the most powerful tool is of young people? rolling your eyes.
I think it's our time.
Are you good at that? And the passion, I mean, the clarity, that's what I want. And I say, this is like asking people, like, how is that? Like, how does that add up? I don't understand, so basically recognizing it's your life they're gambling with. And when you do that, you start to argue differently, and people don't dare you to look into your eyes and say, oh my God, yeah, it's not right what I do. It's a very difficult situation, but I think I would say the following, and I said that before, but just kind of to emphasize that again. Your job is not to solve the entire problem of the world. You cannot solve the entire problem of the world, because nobody, it's so big. But we can recognize what is. Doesn't mean we accept it. We recognize what is, and we recognize there's only one planet. And then we say, this is the context. Given that we are on this track, what is the best thing that I can do for the success of my city, of my family, of my country? What does it need? And they say, oh, clearly, would be very good if we are powered by the sun rather than by coal. Oh, clearly, it would be much better if we don't depend on cars. Oh, clearly, so you can build your universe that also will be able to operate much better. So it makes you safer. Like with COVID, it makes you safer, and it makes the planet a better place. Rather than thinking, oh my God, the world is so big, I can't do anything. Why even start? You can actually start. It's like a storm. The world is like a storm. You live on a boat. Make your boat strong so it can float on during the storm, and you inspire others. And as we fix our boats, the storm will get weaker too. So in some ways, it's not an on and off switch. Either we totally win or we totally lose. It actually matters where you live and what you do with your community to recognize the storm that's coming. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah. It's the context. That's probably the key word. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Okay, thank you, Mathis. Those are technical discussion. Tell us something about California and yourself. We want to know about you. If you can.
I can tell a lot. I mean, I told you about how I grew up, and I live now in California.
Yeah.
And we have big fires here, so it's quite. Actually, we had one day where the smoke was so thick, the sun never came up. It stayed night all day. That was scary. That was like 10 days ago. And then he said, oh my God, it's kind of wild,
Sorry to interrupt. There was one sentence used in our program. Let us have fire in our hearts, not in our forests. Okay, go on, please.
That's very good. And so I think the whole climate issue is very close to people's heart right now, and people say, oh wow, it's really happening. So I think it's shifting kind of our understanding. I hope the understanding is not just to say, oh, I want to fight the people who don't believe in climate change, because that just is finger pointing. I think more important to say, if we accept it, how do we need to change our own cities? How do I need to change my own house? How do we need to change ourselves? And then we start to make positive steps together. But yeah, it's a big journey, and I'm very inspired to see people around the world like you kind of connecting with each other and helping each other, because in the end, I think it's kind of learning from each other that gets us out of it. And speaking the truth, it's actually quite simple, that in the end, we are animals that live on this ecosystem called planet, and we need the food from this planet, so we're not so separate that we could say, oh, this is something separate. We are in that system. We are part of it. We are a subsystem. And it's wonderful how we can work with each other thanks to the internet.
Mathis, the tragedy with human beings is that only bad times make our understanding better of the planet or the things. I wish the good times made our understanding better, so we could live on happily ever after. But anyway, I'll turn to Mika. He's been waiting. He might have some questions also, because
and that may sign off soon, because I'll have to get up very early again for another webinar tomorrow. So, but
okay, yeah.
But Mika has something to say, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mathis. It was great to see you finally live after 17 or 18 years. I remember when you talk about the overshoot day, I think it was then when we had our first contact. It was maybe in the end of October, and now it's in August. So the process has been not so good, but as you said, we have to do something for that. We have to act. And thank you
now-
very much for your time. We hope
It's
to
a pleasure.
have some more
It's
cooperation
awesome.
with you.
Awesome. Yeah, wonderful. It's great.
Thanks.
Very inspiring.
So,
Thank you.
Mathis, that is why we have the organization named as Act Now. There's no time anymore. Even the theme song is like that. We do not have to wait. We do not wait for the other people to do things. We have to act now. In small
Exactly.
measures,
Don't wait
it
for
counts
others.
a lot. So
Correct.
thank you, Mika is going to be with us. Mathis, are you going to be with us a little longer, or you'll be pushing off?
I'm pushing off because very early I have another seminar again. So I have to sleep in
Okay.
between a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Mathis.
But
Thank
this
you
one was the
so
best
much.
one. That's good.
We
So
really
I really enjoyed it.
appreciate
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mathis, again. Thanks from
Be well.
the entire family of Environment Online in Next Now India. I hope you have been to India. Okay. Mika came and he was surprised by the traffic, by the cows, by everything. So when I go out, they always ask
Yeah.
about India, describe India. It's very difficult for me because we have so many time zones, so many cultures.
Yeah.
So I use a sentence, it is from the sublime to the ridiculous. So
Yeah.
we have both extreme. Some
Yeah.
parts are very good, like sublime, and some parts are really
If you're not surprised by India, you're not paying attention.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Mathis, again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, we hope to meet at some point of time again. Mika is going to be with us. And we'll share your videos as time permits us during this show also. And it will be all available online later on in full resolution. Thank you, Mathis.